What were the results from Apple, and what did they say they're going to do in the next 3 months?
Well, these are pretty big numbers, and the markets are going to do what the markets are going to do. Obviously, as you highlighted with Carol there, the concern seems to be tied to the margin, the profit margin that the company has heading into the holiday quarter, because the revenue in this quarter that just ended, roughly $37.5 billion, the company forecasting in that holiday quarter, its fiscal first quarter, could generate between $55 and $58 billion, and perhaps the market looking specifically at this gross margin being shy of the 37.7% estimate on Wall Street at the higher end. Apple talking about 37.5%. And maybe that gets to the bigger issue with Apple, the company that had the early lead in the smartphone race and the tablet race is up against some big competitors who are pricing their products accordingly for the holiday season. Additionally, Apple just got through launching all these new devices, 2 new iPhones, 2 new iPads, a couple of MacBook Pros, and the list goes on for the holiday season, and that can take away from your profitability. We will, however, await some more details from the company on its earnings call. Pim?
Meb Faber, tell me about Apple and the potential for buybacks. $150 billion?
Apple is a great example of why investors need to look at cash distributions in a holistic manner. Right? So they pay a dividend. They also have this buyback. And Carl Icahn's been making a lot of noise, want the buyback to be bigger, but you have to look at the combination of both dividends and buybacks on a holistic level. And when you do that with Apple, you get up into a high single-digit yield, potentially, if they go through with a lot of it, even a double-digit yield.
Do you have shares of Apple? Do you own shares of Apple?
We have a shareholder yield ETF, and it's a quant process, but it looks at this holistic distribution. So, yeah, we own Apple. We're happy with it, but we're looking at companies, regardless of how they paid out, whether it's dividends or buybacks, with almost a 10% yield is great companies to own.
David Kirkpatrick, come in on what Apple is doing with its money. Is this a technology company that spends money on research and development and says, we're going to make the best products, we'll worry about the stock price next?
You basically said it. I mean, they focus so incredibly well on producing great products, and I think they continue to do that. They really impressed a lot of us, including you. We were talking before the show with the new iPad Air. Quite significant improvements incrementally, but real on a product that is really taken over the world and defined an entire category. So one of the things I feel that they've shown in recent months in the last year or so is that without Steve Jobs, they can do just fine. They can keep coming out with really great products. People do say, what's the next category that they're going to invent? And maybe that's a big demand to make of them, but I do think considering where they are, they're doing extremely well. And they have defined the tablet format, which is what's replacing PCs globally. So give them a lot of credit for that.
John Erlichman, come in on what Apple is doing technologically, whether it is with a fingerprint reader or whether it is lightening the iPad itself. Is anybody else doing the same kind of technology?
Yes. We've seen a lot of innovation from companies like Samsung. I do think that shouldn't take away from what Apple's been able to do. I mean, I think the idea of being able to create tablets with this kind of computing power, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, many would say, wow, I mean, this is very, you know, incredible technology that allows you to do this on such a mass scale right now. But the knock against Apple is no different today than it ever has been over the last couple of years, which is that it has been feeling like there are these incremental additional things coming to each device, and people are hungry for the next big thing. But what I'll add to this conversation, and this is a company that just wrapped up a fiscal year in which it generated nearly $54 billion in cash from operations. Apple is aware of the market opportunity that is in front of it today. This same conversation came up when the company unveiled its lower-priced iPhone, and some said, why don't you sell it for less money? If Apple thinks that it can sell as a certain amount of devices at the right price point, why wouldn't you do that? And that's been the difficult balance for them, because aside from public company, they are the innovator in chief, the company we do look for that next big, you know, technological device.
David Kirkpatrick, I wonder if I could just sort of borrow from John Erlichman and pose the issue to you. You know, they seem to sell a very discrete number of products. It does not take a genius to make a list of all the things that Apple sells to their customers.
Yeah,
why
nice simplicity. diversity.
Well, that's the point. In other words, why has that not resonated, do you think, with investors when, you know, John just said, oh, Samsung, and all I can think of is, well, okay, so they have a bigger form factor, they've got a stylus on some of their products, but in terms of Apple, I mean, whoever talks about lightening the actual weight of the product?
Well, you know, I think Apple is perceived increasingly kind of as a value stock, not a growth stock, and that may be part of its problem from the standpoint of investors. I mean, its stock came close to, was around 700, now it's in the mid 500s. Yeah, I don't think it is a company that has already achieved the kind of position that people are betting that Amazon someday will. That's one of the great ironies of this whole thing. You know, Apple is an extraordinary profit machine. 54 billion in cash in the last, I mean, come on.
Well, that's a good Meb, come in on this, because I mean, just as David says, you know, wait a minute, Apple actually generates a lot of money. And yet the market is much more interested in what the future is for Amazon.com as the example. Would you buy Apple shares where they currently are trading above, I think, 520?
We would. And what's important, when you get to the size of an Apple, where you're almost $500 billion in market cap, you have to give some of the money back. You can't reinvest. And so that's one of the reasons.
Why not? Why? I mean,
there's not projects that are going to move the needle when you're making that much money, when you're that size, when you're doing hundreds of billions in sales, when your market cap's $500 billion. You really have to return the cash. It's just the economics of scale.
So Icon's right, and whether he wins per se or not, they're going to do some more serious buybacks.
They don't have a choice, and it's great to see, because historically, if you sort stocks based on buybacks or dividends, it beats the pants off the market. If you sort them on the combination of the two, it does even better.
David Kirkpatrick, you've got a Techonomy conference coming up. I want you to tell us what it's about and also the effect of Apple on the whole conference. Could that be a whole subject matter?
Well, actually, last year we had a session on Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and what was the Google,
Twitter?
Sorry.
No, Google.
The four horsemen, so to speak, and it was a great discussion. Just those four, because they kind of define the whole industry. You know, Techonomy is all about technology's transformative role in all of business and society, an engine for progress. So we really talk about how technology is transforming everything, and Apple is the ultimate symbol of that. Almost any of us, you know, the pundits of the industry, whenever we're trying to make a point, we reach into our pocket, and we always have an iPhone, and we use it as a demonstration of how this incredible technology has dropped extraordinarily in price, sucking all this value into these amazing little boxes that really spare us from the need to spend thousands, maybe even tens of thousands, on things we used to own, record players and bookshelves and CDs and movie cameras.
Well, I'll give you this as just a point, right? The iPhone has 5 million times the computing power of the 8.5-pound computer that sat atop a Titan II ICBM.
Is that amazing or what?
So there you go.
Come on.
When is this Techonomy? When is it coming?
2 weeks from today.
Where?
Outside of Tucson. It's a Ritz-Carlton Dove Mountain Hotel.